This video will explore Chapter 1, Introduction to Biological Concepts and Research. Remember, Chapter 1, Chapter 3, and Chapter 4 lecture notes will be covered on the midterm exam. A study guide for the midterm exam is posted now on Blackboard in the course content section. By the end of this video, and subsequent review of Chapter 1, you should be able to discuss the learning objectives, using information from Chapter 1. Before we explore the principles of biology, we must first define the term biology. Quite simply, biology is the study of living things. This course will examine the core concepts that apply to every living thing on the planet. Before we discuss the specific characteristics of living organisms, it is important to discuss the three characteristics of both living and non-living things. Both living and non-living things can be complex, engage in movement, and are capable of reacting to external or internal stimuli. Be mindful, just because an object is complex, can move, or respond to perturbation, doesn't mean the object is alive, or is a living biological entity. It should not be surprising that both living and non-living entities share similar characteristics, when you consider the fact that both living and non-living systems are built using similar subatomic particles, atoms, and molecular precursors. A biological structure is considered alive, or living if it possesses 7 features. Non-living biological structures do not share all of these features. In addition to the possession of biomolecules, and responding to environmental fluctuations, living organisms are able to obtain biological molecules that serve as building blocks, and energy assimilation molecules from the environment. Living organisms continuously create new molecules, and energy throughout life. A helpful way to remember the 7 characteristics of living organisms, is to use the acronym Mrs. Gren. The M stands for movement, the R stands for respiration, the S stands for sensitivity, the G stands for growth, the R stands for reproduction, the E stands for excretion, and the N stands for nutrition. Obviously, living organisms possess the ability to move, in order to locate food, and to avoid danger. If you look carefully, you will notice that even plants move slightly, to seek out, and secure more sunlight. We are all aware that living things are capable of reproducing, or creating a similar, or identical copy of themselves. We know that humans have the ability to create another human, in about 9 months, while some bacteria can engage in bacterial reproduction processes, and produce new bacteria in under 1 hour. For example, E. coli can reproduce in 20 minutes. As we already mentioned, both living things, and non-living things are capable of being stimulated by internal, or external agents, such as physical contact, temperature, and disease-causing pathogens, to name a few. Unlike non-living things, living things have the ability to increasingly become larger, and increase their overall physical size using internal biological processes that promote their size increase. Respiration involves the conversion of larger molecules to simple molecules, with the subsequent production, release, and utilization of energy, in the form of adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. Respiratory processes take place within biological membranes, and requires many different proteins, and enzymes. Excretion is another feature of living organisms, and involves the elimination of metabolic byproducts from the body. Living organisms acquire paramount substances needed for reproduction, and respiration. This image illustrates the 7 characteristics of living organisms. Take the time to review this sample midterm exam question. If you have any questions about this slide, contact Dr. Flowers via email. Much like the rungs on a ladder, or steps in a staircase, there are levels of biological organization. At the lower levels, all living organisms consist of simple molecules. The higher levels of biological organization include millions of living organisms. The most basic unit of life are cells. Cells are self-contained living units, and exist as unicellular organisms such as bacteria, and multicellular organisms, such as humans. Populations consist of individuals of the same species occupying the same habitat. A population consists of only one group of organisms, of the same type, for example, humans in a particular environment. A community consists of different groups of populations living in the same place at the same time, for example when lions, tigers, and bears live in the same environment, that is considered a community. An ecosystem is a combination of many different types of living organisms, and the environment in which they live. The biosphere includes every living and non-living thing on planet Earth. This figure illustrates that as the levels of biological organization increase, so too does the complexity of the organism, collection, numbers, and different types of living and non-living organisms. This figure provides an excellent view that clearly demonstrates the levels of biological organization. For the midterm exam, you need to understand how the organism level is different from the population level, and how the population level is different from the community level. Take the time to study this figure to enhance your understanding of this important concept. There are four prominent theories that connect the principles of biology. The four theories are the cell theory, the gene theory, the theory of heredity, and the theory of evolution. The cell theory essentially states that all living organisms are made up of cells, either one cell, or millions of cells. The gene theory states that biological information is encoded in genes, or functional segments of DNA that produce proteins. The theory of heredity states genes are located on chromosomes, and that genetic information is transmitted from parent to offspring. The final theory, the theory of evolution, states that living organisms change over time to adapt to their ever-changing environment. Specifically, genes are made up of DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid, which is a long polymer, made up of two strands of nucleotides wrapped around each other. DNA consists of four nucleotides, adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. Nucleotides on different strands are connected via hydrogen bonds. Adenine is always connected to thymine, and guanine is always connected to cytosine. The entire genetic complement contained in a biological organism is called the organism's genome. Individual species contain unique DNA molecules that make each species different from other species. As shown on the figure, DNA is converted into RNA, and then into proteins, that are subsequently used by the cell to perform specialized cellular functions. Living cells can be viewed as tiny cellular factories. Cells make thousands of new molecules every second of every day. The current image on the left illustrates the conversion of DNA to RNA, called transcription. The conversion of RNA to protein is called translation. Again, there are different types of proteins in each cell that perform life-sustaining functions. As mentioned before, living organisms, unlike non-living organisms, are capable of reproduction. Reproduction is the process by which living organisms give rise to offspring, or the production of a new, nearly identical individual. Parents transmit genetic information in the form of DNA to children, children inherit DNA, and subsequently physical features, behavioral traits, and disease dispositions from their parents. This slide shows that through genetic inheritance processes, offspring, or children receive DNA, or genes from their parents. This is also known as heredity. Notice, in the image on the right side, the child contains a portion of the chromosomes from the mother and father. In humans, a female egg is capable of uniting with a male sperm to produce a zygote in the process of fertilization. The zygote develops into an embryo, and after billions of cell divisions for approximately 9 months, produces a baby. During the embryo stage, the organism is in the early stages of growth and differentiation, and is characterized by cleavage, and the laying down of fundamental tissues, and the formation of primitive organs, and organ systems. This figure shows the life cycle stages of the atlas moth, Attacus atlas. The term life cycle refers to the series of shape, size, and genetic changes in the life of an organism. Typically, we can see the shape and size changes that occur during the life cycle. Genetic changes can only be observed using experimental procedures. Metabolism refers to all the biochemical reactions in a cell. Metabolic pathways provide the necessary energy and carbon precursors living organisms need. One major metabolic process that occurs in plants is called photosynthesis. Photosynthesis involves the conversion of light energy from the sun into chemical energy. Living organisms specifically utilize catabolic reactions, or breakdown reactions to convert large molecules into smaller molecules, with the subsequent release in usable energy for the cell to perform vital activities. The discussion of metabolism seeks to address what happens to the food that we eat. Metabolic pathways describe how human cells break down carbohydrates, proteins, nucleic acids, and lipids to produce energy for the individual organism. There are three important terms you need to know when considering the concepts of energy flow and nutrient recycling. The terms are producers, consumers, and decomposers. Producers are organisms, such as green plants, that are viewed as a source of food and nutrients that can be consumed by other organisms. Consumers are organisms requiring complex organic compounds for food, which it obtains by preying on other organisms, or by eating particles of organic matter. Decomposers are organisms, such as bacteria and fungi that return molecules and other organic substances to various ecological cycles, by feeding on and breaking down dead animals. The sun supports virtually all life on the planet. The sun leads to photosynthesis, which produces carbohydrates in plants. Other animals, such as herbivores, only eat plants, and carnivores eat herbivores. Bacteria and fungi decompose decaying remains. Within a particular ecosystem, matter is never lost, it only recycles between biotic and abiotic elements. Another property that differentiates living organisms from non-living organisms is the property of homeostasis. Homeostasis is the ability, or tendency to maintain, an internal stability in an organism, to compensate for environmental changes. An example of homeostasis is the human body keeping an average temperature of 98.6 degrees. Another property that differentiates living organisms from non-living organisms is the property of evolution. Evolution implies a change in living organisms over a long period of time. Evolutionary changes in living organisms are designed to allow living organisms to adapt to their environment. Evolution is the theory explaining the appearance of new species through the action of various biological mechanisms. Evolution are the cumulative inherited genetic and physical changes in a population of organisms through time, leading to the appearance of new types of organisms. It is also the process by which new species, or populations of living things, develop from pre-existing forms through successive generations. Charles Darwin is credited for developing the theory of evolution. Again, evolution is the theory explaining the appearance of new species, traits, features, biological functions, and organismal types through the action of various biological mechanisms. One of the biological mechanisms that promote evolution is natural selection. Natural selection is the natural process that results in the survival and reproductive success of life forms that are best suited and adapted to their environment. Natural selection also promotes the retention of the most beneficial genes and proteins that give biological organisms the best chance at surviving specific environments. This figure provides a great illustration of evolution and natural selection. Over time, the light-colored mice are killed by the birds because they are more visible than darker-colored mice, which are more suited for survival in their current environment. Essentially, nature selects for the darker-colored mice by removing or killing the light-colored mice. The genes, or DNA, that promote the dark fur are retained in the mice population, while the genes, or DNA, that promote light fur are removed from the population. Thus, mice and other organisms evolve by becoming better adapted to their environment. Mutations, or changes in DNA structure, are one of the root causes of diversity in the numbers and types of life forms that exist today. Mutations can either be silent, that is, do not cause significant changes in the protein function. Some mutations are lethal, that is, they result in disease or death, and then there are those mutations that result in beneficial changes to protein function, and hence provide beneficial features to the organism. A major example of the negative impacts of mutations is observed in sickle cell anemia. People with sickle cell anemia have a single base pair mutation in the beta-globin gene, resulting in the substitution of the amino acid valine for glutamic acid. This change in amino acid sequence results in a sickled-shaped red blood cell that leads to the disease pathology associated with sickle cell anemia. We have already explored the advantages of beneficial mutations and retention of beneficial proteins for living organisms using previous figures. This slide provides more detailed information on the mice and a specific gene that produces fur color. In the rock pocket mice, it is the MC1R gene that, depending on the presence or absence of mutations in the MC1R gene, can produce various changes in mice fur color. Look at the image on the right. Depending on the environment, changes to the MC1R gene may affect survival of the organism. Mice with light fur that live in on dark-colored terrain are more susceptible to being detected and eaten by birds and other predators. The next topic we will explore is the science of taxonomy. Taxonomy is the study of classification of living organisms. Classification is the systematic arrangement of living organisms based on established criteria. Most of us are familiar with the classical taxonomic scheme shown on this slide, highlighted in blue. If you read the blue highlighted taxonomic hierarchy from left to right, in the top part of your screen, organisms are grouped using the most specific taxonomic type, species, to the most general taxonomic type, the kingdom and domain level. Use the figure on this slide to enhance your understanding of hierarchy of biological classification. While only one organism, the red cardinal, is found at the top of the image, or species level, millions of organisms are located in the domain Eukarya. As you move up the hierarchy, the numbers of organisms decrease. As you move from the bottom to the top, the number of organisms decrease. In this graphic, there are 8 organisms in the domain Eukarya, while there is only one organism at the species level. In this graphic, there are 280,000 species at the kingdom level, and only one species at the species level. You can use the mnemonic device, shown on this slide, to remember the traditional hierarchical classification system. All living organisms are identified throughout the scientific community, using 2 elements of the taxonomic biological classification system, genus and species. When we use both the genus and species name to describe living organisms, it is referred to as their binomial name, or scientific name, or binomial nomenclature. The G in the term genus can stand for general and the S in species can stand for specific. The genus is a general way of describing life that encompasses a group of similar organisms, while the species describes a specific organism. The scientific name for humans is Homo sapien, where the genus name is Homo, and the species name is sapien. The word Homo means wise man, or human-like qualities, and the term sapien means wise, knowing, or sentient. This slide breaks down the binomial nomenclature system. Again, only the genus and species components of the taxonomic classification system is used in the binomial nomenclature, or scientific name. Take the time to review this sample midterm exam question. If you have any questions about this slide, contact Dr. Flowers via email. In this next slide, we will discuss how biologists visualize the relationship between organisms. The image on the right is a phylogenetic tree. Phylogenetic trees are used by biologists to show how living organisms are related, or not related. Phylogenetic trees are graphical representations about the evolutionary relationships among a group of organisms. A phylogenetic tree may be built using body shape, biochemical, behavioral, or molecular data of species. Phylogeny is the study of the evolutionary history of a group of organisms. Thus, phylogenetic relationships are evolutionary relationships. Phylogenetics uses molecular data, such as DNA nucleotide sequences, and protein amino acid sequences to construct phylogenetic trees. If 2 organisms have similar nucleotide sequences, or amino acid sequences, they are close to each other on the tree. If 2 organisms have very different nucleotide sequences, or amino acid sequences, they are farther apart on the tree. In the 20th century, Carl Woese used ribosomal RNA gene sequences to classify all life on Earth. He created the tree of life, where he established the three-domain system. He posited that all life on Earth originated from an ancestor cell, that branched off into either domain bacteria, domain archaea, and domain eukarya. Domain eukarya includes the eukaryotes made up of four major groups of organisms: the protists, fungi, plants, and animals, which of course, includes humans. The most general phylogenetic tree was developed to depict the relationships of all the organisms on Earth, at the domain level. Bacteria, archaea, and eukarya are the three domains depicted on the tree of life. Using this graphic and organizational strategy, organisms are grouped based on the similarity or non-similarity of their ribosomal RNA gene sequences. Since archaea and eukarya have more ribosomal RNA gene sequences in common, archaea and eukarya are shown closer together on the tree of life. The domain bacteria and domain archaea includes the prokaryotes. Prokaryotes represent one-celled or unicellular microorganisms that lack a distinct nucleus and membrane-bound organelles, and are classified into two domains, bacteria and archaea. The domain eukarya includes the eukaryotes. Eukaryotes include unicellular and multicellular organisms, containing a visibly evident nucleus and organelles. In general, prokaryotes are smaller and structurally less complex compared to eukaryotes, which are on average much larger and biochemically more complex. The domain bacteria include the bacterial prokaryotes. Remember, prokaryotes are unicellular organisms that do not possess a nucleus. While there are many different shapes of bacteria, the three main bacterial shapes are bacillus, or rod-shaped bacteria, coccus, or ball-shaped bacteria, and spiral-shaped bacteria. Bacteria contain peptidoglycan in their cell walls and divide via binary fission. Binary fission is the reproduction of a cell by division into two approximately equal parts. The domain archaea are also prokaryotes. Organisms in this domain do not have peptidoglycan in their cell walls like bacteria. Archaeal prokaryotes are capable of living in very extreme environments, and thus, many organisms in this domain are known as extremophiles. For example, thermophiles can live in temperatures that would kill humans. Extremophiles are a fascinating group of organisms you will learn more about in microbiology. In this course, we will discuss several groups found in the domain eukarya, protozoa, fungi, plantae, animalia, and algae. The protozoans are all unicellular eukaryotic organisms that do not contain cell walls. Protozoans acquire food and escape danger using three types of motile structures. The three major motile structures are pseudopods, cilia, and flagella. A pseudopod is a temporary protrusion or retractile process of the cytoplasm of a cell, such as an amoeba or a white blood cell, that functions as an organ of locomotion, or in taking up food, or other particulate matter. Cilia are small hair-like structures capable of lashing movement, and serves especially in free unicellular organisms to produce locomotion. Flagella are whip-like structures that help eukaryotic cells move. The algae are eukaryotic organisms that exist as unicellular, or multicellular organisms. Their cell walls are composed of cellulose. Cellulose is a large polysaccharide made up of glucose units, that constitutes the chief part of the cell walls of plants and algae. Algae produce energy via photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the conversion of light energy into chemical energy, and results in the formation of carbohydrates from carbon dioxide. Photosynthesis literally means, to put together with the help of light. Photosynthesis is what first produced oxygen in the atmosphere billions of years ago, and it's still what keeps it there today. Plants are very similar to algae, with the exception that all members in this group are multicellular. Plants consist of trees, vines, shrubs, or herbs. Plants are multicellular eukaryotes that are mostly photosynthetic organisms, typically lacking locomotive movement, or obvious nervous, or sensory organs, and possessing cellulose cell walls. Fungi appear as unicellular and multicellular organisms. Yeasts are unicellular, while bread mold is a multicellular fungal representative. Fungi are eukaryotes that contain chitin in their cell walls. Chitin is a large nitrogen-containing polysaccharide that forms part of the hard outer integument of insects, arachnids, and crustaceans. Fungal organisms are known to act as decomposers. Remember that decomposers return constituents of organic substances to ecological cycles by feeding on and breaking down dead animals and other organisms. Obviously, animals, such as humans, are in the domain eukarya and contain eukaryotic cells. Animal cells do not contain cell walls and are multicellular organisms. Animals possess diverse organ systems and inhabit diverse environments. Biology research drives every medical breakthrough, scientific advance, and the acquisition and dissemination of knowledge. Biological research can be basic, or theoretical, and applied. Society is more familiar with applied research. Applied biological research endeavors were a major factor in producing the vaccines that ended the COVID-19 pandemic. The scientific method consists of principles and procedures for the systematic pursuit of knowledge involving the recognition and formulation of a problem, the collection of data through observation and experiment, and the formulation and testing of hypotheses. The scientific method guides biologists to new information, novel insights, and innovative scientific breakthroughs. The scientific method is an investigative approach to acquiring knowledge. Biologists use the scientific method every day. This method typically contains 6 stages. You should understand the various stages of the scientific method prior to the first exam. First, scientists make observations about the natural world and develop working questions based on specific observations. Once the facts have been observed and questions generated, biologists develop an educated guess or hypothesis to explain the observations. A hypothesis is an assumption, an idea that is proposed for the sake of argument, so that it can be tested to see if it might be true. A hypothesis is usually tentative, it's an assumption or suggestion made strictly for the objective of being tested using biological experiments. Hypotheses generally explain the relationship between variables, or factors that may differ among places or individuals. Next, biologists make predictions based on the hypothesis. Predictions must be tested with experimentation, thus, biologists test their predictions by collecting information, or data. Experiments contain variables that are adjusted to test the hypothesis. A control is used to clarify the experimental data. Once the experimental data is analyzed, conclusions are generated that allow biologists to accept or reject the initial hypothesis. Scientists share their work through publications, which allows other researchers to repeat and verify their findings. Take the time to review this sample midterm exam question. If you have any questions about this slide, contact Dr. Flowers via email. Biologists test their hypotheses and predictions with tests or experiments that generate relevant data. If data from just one experiment refutes a scientific hypothesis, the hypothesis must be modified or abandoned. Also, note that biologists never say they are 100% right. What they say is that based on the data produced, it is highly likely that hypotheses are accurate and explain biological phenomena. Analyze this figure for a moment. This figure illustrates an experimental research project designed to address the significance of a commercial fertilizer. A scientific control is an experiment or observation designed to minimize the effects of variables other than the independent variable, and used to clarify the conclusions of an experiment. A proper control in an experiment is used as a standard of comparison to the experimental component. A controlled experiment is an experiment in which all the variable factors in an experimental group and a comparison control group are kept the same, except for one variable factor in the experimental group that is changed or altered. This helps implicate the cause of specific results or clarify research findings. Analyze this figure for a moment. This figure shows you the benefit of performing a controlled experiment. The control in this experiment is the experiment in which water is eliminated. That is, both pots receive the same number of seeds, however, only the experimental pot labeled A receives water, while the control pot labeled B does not receive water. The data shows that water plays a huge role in the growth and development of plants.